The world 12,000 years ago is still marked by the long shadow of the Ice Age. Vast sheets of ice have only recently retreated from much of northern Europe, Asia, and North America. The air is warming, but the memory of cold remains in the shape of valleys carved by glaciers, in the boulders left behind in open fields, and in the meltwater that feeds wide rivers. Forests spread slowly where once there was only tundra. Animals move with the changing land. Mammoths, though dwindling, still walk in some regions, while red deer, gazelle, and wild cattle thrive in the greener zones. The planet is shifting. Step by step, humans adjust to these new conditions. They are no longer bound only to icy plains or scattered shelters. They notice the way rivers swell in spring, the way grasses bend under the weight of seeds in summer, the way animals follow the water as it withdraws into dry seasons. Where glaciers withdraw, wetlands appear. Where permafrost once held the soil hard and frozen. Softer ground now gives root to shrubs and early forests. Birch and willow spread first, followed by oak and pistachio in the warm regions of the Near East. This growth transforms the rhythm of the year. Archaeologists describe this period as the transition from the Pleistocene to the Holocene. It is a time of change not only in climate, but in the scale of human life. Small groups of foragers have always moved with the seasons. But now, some places offer more than passing abundance. There are valleys where wild grains grow thick, where herds gather, where water flows steadily even in the dry months. Such regions begin to act like magnets, pulling people back year after year. They are the seeds of stability. The Fertile Crescent is one such region. Stretching from the Levant through northern Mesopotamia, it holds a diversity of landscapes, rolling hills, limestone ridges, floodplains, and seasonal rivers. After the ice retreats, this zone becomes green and rich. Wild barley and wheat grow in patches across open slopes. Almonds and figs sprout along rocky soil. Gazelle move in great numbers, their migrations predictable to watchful eyes. Here, human groups find that they do not always need to wander far. They can return to the same hillsides and valleys, gathering food that renews itself. From the perspective of global history, the scale of this shift is immense. Sea levels rise as ice melts, swallowing ancient coastlines. Whole land bridges that once connected regions disappear under the sea. Britain, once part of continental Europe, becomes an island. The vast shelf that connected Southeast Asia to Australia shrinks into scattered islands. Oceans expand, altering wind and rainfall patterns. Across the planet, new opportunities and new dangers appear. Some animals vanish, unable to adapt. Others thrive, reshaping ecosystems. Humans, small in number compared to later ages, must constantly sense these changes. One striking detail left behind from this era is the presence of microliths, tiny stone blades shaped to fit into wooden shafts. They are light, sharp, and easy to replace. These tools reveal the delicate adjustments humans make to hunting strategies as animals and environments change. Another clue lies in shell beads found far from any coast, carried inland by trade or memory. They remind us that even in an age of slow travel, human networks extend beyond a single valley. Yet mysteries remain. Why, at this particular time, do humans begin to settle more firmly in certain places? Was it only the warming climate and the spread of grains? Or was there also a shift in how groups thought about land and belonging? Archaeologists debate whether necessity drove people to experiment with permanence, or whether shared rituals and gatherings created the pull of place. The evidence suggests both forces at work, intertwined in ways we cannot fully separate. At the planetary scale, Earth is moving into a more stable climatic phase. The Holocene brings warmth and relative predictability compared to the wild swings of the Ice Age. This stability is crucial. It allows plants to grow in regular cycles, rivers to flow with more steady rhythms, and human plans to extend further into the future. Yet even within this calmer period, sudden cold spells still occur. Around 11,000 years ago, a sharp, cooling event interrupts the warming trend. Communities must adapt quickly, finding resilience in uncertainty. It is in this delicate balance between change and stability that the first seeds of the village appear. People notice that certain valleys keep giving, that food is there again when they return, that shelters built last season may still stand when they arrive. Slowly, the habit of returning becomes the habit of staying. The world itself seems to invite permanence. At this threshold, humanity does not yet build cities. They do not yet sow crops in ordered rows, but they begin to see that the land can hold them, not just for a season, but for lifetimes. The path to the first known village begins here, in a world still echoing with ice, but opening to warmth, growth, and the possibility of something new. The Fertile Crescent lies between desert and mountains, shaped like a great arc of life across the Near East. Here, in valleys and plains softened by rains, the green of new plants spreads where once the ground was bare. 12,000 years ago, this region stands out like a ribbon of possibility. While vast parts of the world still recover from ice, here the land opens to growth. The change is visible in every detail. Rivers, fed by melting snow from distant mountains, cut across dry ground. Springs push up from limestone ridges, creating small oases. Seasonal streams leave behind fertile silt. The land offers water, shelter, and food in repeating cycles. Step by step, grasses thicken into fields of wild cereals. Barley, einkorn, and emmer wheat grow naturally, their seeds scattering in the wind, their stalks bending with the weight of ripening grain. In spring, the hills turn green with shoots. In summer, they turn golden, shimmering in the dry air. Figs, pistachios, and almonds ripen on rocky slopes. Acorns fall from oak groves where forests press against the open land. The air is alive with birds. Partridges move through the grass, waterfowl gather near lakes, and cranes rise in the evening sky. For human groups arriving here, the abundance is unlike what they have known in harsher lands. They no longer rely only on chance hunts or scattered roots. They can gather baskets of grain, dry it, and carry it through the year. They can watch the herds of gazelle that move through the valleys and know they will return again. They can collect fruits in season, nuts in autumn, and reeds from riverbanks to use in weaving or building. This variety creates security. And with security comes the possibility of staying longer. Archaeological sites across this zone preserve traces of these changes. At places like Abu Huraira on the Euphrates, remains of wild barley and lentils show how people collected and stored plants. Grinding stones, heavy slabs with worn hollows, reveal that seeds were crushed into flour long before farming began. At Jerf el Ahmar and Muribit, evidence of repeated occupation appears. Hearths rebuilt in the same places, post holes marking structures, debris layers building up through time. These are signs not of random camps but of chosen sites, returned to again and again. The richness of the land extends beyond food. Stone is plentiful in the hills, providing material for tools and building. Obsidian, volcanic glass sharp as a razor, is carried from Anatolia into the Levant, showing networks of exchange. Marine shells, polished into beads, appear in inland settlements far from the sea. Such items speak of contact, trade, and shared symbols. The Fertile Crescent is not only fertile in crops but in human connections. Yet the abundance also raises questions. Why here? And why now? Do people begin to shift from wandering to gathering in one place? Part of the answer lies in climate. The end of the Ice Age creates warmer, wetter conditions in this region. Rainfall patterns stabilize. Rivers cut more reliable courses. Plants respond with renewed growth. But part of the answer is social. As groups gather, they meet, they share, they perhaps compete. Rituals, feasts, and alliances may bind them more strongly to place. The act of returning itself builds tradition. One lesser-known detail lies in the bones of gazelle found in early settlements. The ages of the animals reveal hunting patterns. People targeted herds in specific seasons, often during migrations. This shows careful observation, planning, and cooperation. It also shows how tied they were to the rhythms of the land. They stayed when the gazelle came, moved when they left, and perhaps began to imagine ways of making the animals stay longer. Such thoughts foreshadow domestication. At a planetary scale, the Fertile Crescent is only one of several centers where abundance gathers. In China, the valleys of the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers see wild rice and millet. In Mesoamerica, squash and wild beans grow. In New Guinea, taro and yams spread in damp soils. But here, in the Near East, conditions align especially well. The mix of grains, pulses, fruit trees, and herd animals creates a foundation unlike any other. It is this combination that makes the region the cradle of villages. Still, mysteries remain. Archaeologists debate whether people first stayed because of food storage or whether ritual gatherings created the pull. At sites like Göbekli Tepe, massive carved stones from this same era suggest that ritual spaces arose even before permanent farming. Perhaps people first built places of meeting and worship, then built homes nearby. Or perhaps homes came first and rituals followed. The evidence does not give a single answer. What it shows is that both strands, food and meaning, wove together in the same landscape. As the Fertile Crescent grows green, the world around it shifts as well. North Africa sees the Sahara turn into grassland lakes and rivers, the so-called Green Sahara. Europe grows forests where tundra once lay. South Asia fills with monsoon rains. Yet in the Fertile Crescent, the balance of wet and dry, mountain and plain, river and desert, creates a unique mosaic. For humans, this mosaic offers choices. They can hunt, they can gather, they can store, and soon they will begin to plant. In the slow rhythm of seasons, the land teaches patience. The grains fall and sprout again. The rivers flood and retreat. The herds pass and return. Each year the cycle repeats. Each year humans learn more. By watching closely, by storing what they gather, by remembering where food grows best, they take the first steps toward a new way of life. a way not of wandering without end, but of rooting themselves in place. This is the promise of the green, fertile crescent, a promise that will lead to the first village. Across the newly green valleys of the Fertile Crescent, small human groups begin to move with intention. They are still hunters and gatherers, but their choices of where to walk, where to pause, and where to return are becoming more patterned. These groups know that wild grains ripen in certain valleys in summer, that nuts fall from oak groves in autumn, and that gazelle herds pass predictably along the same paths each year. They know where rivers shrink into pools in the dry season, and where springs feed water into the land even when the surface is parched. Over time, they learn that some locations provide more than others, and that these places can be relied upon year after year. The rhythm of return begins. The act of returning carries meaning. To walk a long distance and then recognize a valley where food once grew is to feel the connection between memory and land. Families pass on this memory to children, showing them the place where barley heads grow thick, or where figs cluster near the rocks. With each generation, the knowledge deepens. Certain areas become favored, almost like anchors in the shifting patterns of foraging. Camps are rebuilt where old firestones still lie, post holes dug again where shelters once stood. At archaeological sites such as Ohalo II on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, which predates 12,000 years ago but hints at the same tendency. Charred seeds and remnants of huts show long-term return to a lakeside location. By the beginning of the Holocene, such behaviors intensify. At Abu Huraira, layers of occupation reveal people harvesting wild cereals on a scale that suggests repeated, planned return. At Muribit, hearths are renewed in the same spots again and again, creating a depth of living traces. These are not random scatterings, they are marks of groups who know where they are going. The abundance of the Fertile Crescent makes this possible. In other regions, scarcity forces constant movement. But here, the land itself provides a reason to linger. Wild wheat and barley can be harvested, parched, and stored. Nuts can be cracked and kept through the winter. Dried gazelle meat can last long after the herds have moved on. Even reeds from the river can be bundled and dried for later use in mats, ropes, and coverings. Step by step. These acts of storage encourage return because supplies kept in one place are easiest to find when one comes back. Yet the decision to return is not only practical, it is also social. When groups gather at the same sites year after year, they see one another more often. Families meet, share food, and exchange stories. Marriages may form between groups. Disputes may arise, but so too do alliances, rituals, whether in the form of shared meals, dances, or ceremonies around fire, become easier to repeat in familiar ground. The landscape itself becomes part of the memory of these gatherings. The act of meeting in the same place strengthens bonds across generations. A lesser-known detail from early sites is the evidence of grinding stones far larger and heavier than a single traveller would wish to carry. These querns, worn with grooves from years of grinding seeds, suggest permanence. They are too heavy to move easily. To leave them behind is to commit to return. Their presence in archaeological layers tells us that people made choices with the expectation of coming back, of finding the stone again when the grain ripened once more. Still, mysteries surround this stage of human life. Was the return entirely guided by necessity, or did certain places gain a sense of sacredness that drew people beyond simple need? Some archaeologists suggest that early gathering places were also early ritual sites. The construction of stone circles and communal spaces, like those later found at Göbekli Tepe, may have begun in this context. People may have chosen to return not only because food was abundant, but because meaning was embedded in the land. The evidence hints at this, but does not yet answer it fully. On a planetary scale, the Holocene climate continues to stabilize. Glaciers retreat further. Sea levels rise steadily, submerging the coastlines where humans once walked. Rivers cut deeper into valleys, creating fertile floodplains. Forests expand northward, filling lands that were once tundra. Across Eurasia and the Americas, humans adapt to shifting ecosystems. But in the Fertile Crescent, the balance of wet and dry is unique, creating a corridor of abundance unlike most of the world. It is in this corridor that humans first find themselves able to gather, return, and begin the long process of settlement. The distances involved are not vast by later standards. A journey from one seasonal camp to another may be only a few days' walk, perhaps 40 or 50 kilometers. Yet in human terms, the commitment to return year after year transforms the sense of space. What was once endless land becomes a map of familiar points: the grain valley, the hunting plain, the river crossing. Over time, the web of these familiar points grows denser until some places dominate as central nodes of life. This change alters the fabric of daily existence. Fires no longer need to be struck from raw stone every time, because embers can be kept burning in hearths left behind. Shelter frames may be rebuilt on the same foundations. Pits dug for storage may still hold useful supplies. These continuities blur the line between temporary camp and permanent settlement. Humans are still moving, but their movements circle back upon themselves, creating the beginnings of rootedness. As archaeologists sift through the remains, they see not only tools and bones, but patterns of repetition. The hearth in one layer lies directly above another from a season before. A cluster of stones forming a shelter base appears again and again, slightly altered each time. These patterns whisper of human choices, of decisions made across seasons to return to the known rather than venture always into the new. The first villages are still in the future, but the path toward them is becoming visible. It begins not with walls or fields, but with the simple act of remembering where abundance lies and choosing to come back. Year after year, season after season, memory and land weave together. What begins as return will soon become residence. On the limestone hills of the northern Fertile Crescent, scattered stones begin to rise into deliberate shapes. They do not form walls of houses, nor fences around fields, for farming has not yet begun. Instead, they stand upright in circles, carved and placed with effort. 12,000 years ago, in this landscape of grass and stone, the first stone circles appear. They mark places where people gather not only to eat and rest, but to share rituals and meaning. The hills echo with new expressions of human presence. These stone constructions are found most famously at sites such as Göbekli Tepe in modern-day southeastern Turkey. Here, massive T-shaped pillars were raised by communities who still lived by hunting and gathering. Some weigh many tons, quarried from nearby limestone bedrock. The pillars are arranged in circles, with larger central stones surrounded by smaller ones. On their surfaces, animals are carved: foxes, lions, vultures, snakes. The images are sharp, deliberate, and filled with detail. They show that humans at this time invested great energy not only in survival, but in creating spaces of shared symbolism. Archaeologists debate the purpose of these structures. Were they temples and places of worship? Were they communal gathering spaces or ritual centers where multiple groups came together? The absence of domestic remains inside the circles, no hearths, no household tools, suggests they were not homes. Instead, they seem to be spaces set apart, devoted to something beyond daily living. What exactly that something was remains a mystery. Some propose ancestor worship, others seasonal ceremonies linked to hunting or harvest. The truth is uncertain, but the effort involved reveals how important these spaces were. One lesser-known detail is that smaller, simpler stone enclosures are found at other sites of the same era, such as Halanchemi and Nevelud Chori. These places do not have monumental pillars, but they show similar circular layouts. It suggests that the idea of building a special space, apart from ordinary life, was widespread. The impulse to mark land with stone was not unique to a single valley, but part of a broader shift in human thought. The act of building with stone carries deep implications. For nomadic foragers, mobility is essential. To invest labor in heavy structures is to tether meaning to a specific place. The circle becomes a point of return. It signals that this location holds importance not only for its food or water, but for its role in memory and ritual. Over time, these markers strengthen the habit of gathering at the same site. They are anchors for community. At the planetary scale, this innovation stands out. While groups in other parts of the world create symbolic objects, painted caves in Europe, carved bone and ivory figurines in Siberia, ochre designs in Africa, here humans begin to reshape the very landscape with stone. The earth itself becomes canvas and structure. It is one of the earliest moments when humans alter their environment in ways that endure for millennia. Even now, the stones remain, long after the communities who raised them have vanished. Still, questions linger. Why carve animals into the pillars, and why such specific ones? Some researchers suggest that the creatures represented groups or clans, each gathering under its animal sign. Others argue the animals reflect dangers or powers observed in nature, transformed into symbols of protection or fertility. Another puzzle lies in how these hunter-gatherers organized the labor to move such massive stones. Without beasts of burden or metal tools, they relied only on human strength, ropes, and wooden levers. The coordination required implies a high degree of social organization, far beyond what was once imagined for mobile foragers. The construction of stone circles also intersects with the cycles of food and season. Some archaeologists suggest that large feasts accompanied the building. Remains of gazelle bones at nearby sites hint at mass hunts, where entire herds were driven into enclosures and killed, providing meat for gatherings. Such feasts would have drawn many groups together, reinforcing bonds and shared purpose. The building of stone and the sharing of food may have been inseparable. The distances people traveled to reach these sites are significant. Obsidian from Anatolia, marine shells from the Mediterranean, and other exotic materials appear in the same archaeological layers. This suggests that people came from far away, carrying not only materials but also ideas. The circles may have served as regional centers, where groups exchanged goods, stories, and symbols. In this sense, they are not only local constructions but nodes in a wider human network. One can imagine the slow rhythm of such gatherings. The land dries in summer, the grains are harvested, the herds pass through. Afterward, groups converge on the hill, carrying supplies, tools, and offerings. Fires are lit around the rising stones. Food is shared. Rituals performed. Alliances renewed. When the gathering ends, people scatter back into the valleys, but the stones remain, silent markers of memory, waiting for the next season's return. The act of placing stone in a circle also reshapes human thought. Circles are spaces without corners, without divisions. They allow people to face one another equally, to stand in a ring where all can see. Such design encourages shared identity, different from the separation of individual shelters. It may be one of the first steps toward imagining society as more than family groups, as something larger, bound together by place and ritual. Yet the stones also raise mysteries of belief. Were they meant to hold back danger, to honor the dead, or to call upon unseen powers? Some carved images show headless humans alongside vultures, leading some to suggest that excarnation, the exposure of bodies to birds, was practiced. Others see the images as symbolic, not literal. The meaning is lost to time. What remains clear is that humans, 12,000 years ago, devoted themselves to ideas beyond survival. They began to build not only for shelter, but for meaning. In the quiet hills of the Fertile Crescent, these stone circles mark the dawn of a new human capacity to anchor memory and ritual in permanent form. They are among the first monuments of humanity. They stand at the threshold between mobile life and rooted community, between the endless wandering of foragers and the first sense of place that would one day become a village. Among the gentle slopes and valleys of the Fertile Crescent, people begin to notice something remarkable. The wild grasses that cover the hillsides are not only edible, but abundant in certain seasons. Their stalks rise above the ground, golden in the summer sun, and their heads are heavy with seeds. Barley, einkorn, and emmer wheat sway in the breeze, scattering grains onto the soil, where some fall into cracks and germinate again. These grains, once gathered casually in small quantities, are now collected more deliberately. 12,000 years ago, this careful gathering signals a quiet turning point in human history. The process is slow and simple. Women and men cut the stalks with flint blades or pull them by hand. Seeds are collected in woven baskets made of reeds or grasses. Once brought to camp, they are spread out to dry in the sun, then rubbed or pounded to loosen the husks. The edible kernels are small, but when gathered in large amounts, they provide a reliable source of nourishment. Unlike meat, which spoils quickly, grains can be stored for weeks or months. This property alone makes them invaluable. The discovery of grinding stones marks this change with striking clarity. Large flat slabs of limestone or basalt, paired with smaller handstones, are found at early sites such as Abu Huraira and Jerf el Ahmar. Their surfaces are worn smooth by repeated use. In some, deep hollows form where seeds have been ground again and again. The flour produced is coarse, but it can be mixed with water and cooked on hot stones into simple flatbread. Such bread provides dense calories, easier to carry and eat than raw grain. These tools, heavy and stationary, are clues that humans are beginning to invest in places where they expect to return. Archaeologists note that grinding stones are among the heaviest artifacts left behind. A traveler would not carry them long distances. To abandon them is to signal the intention of coming back. The presence of these stones, sometimes in clusters, shows that families or groups had established regular gathering sites. They reveal not only a new diet, but a new relationship with place. A lesser-known detail lies in the microscopic study of ancient seeds. Impressions of grain kernels are sometimes preserved in clay or soil. By comparing them to wild and later domesticated varieties, researchers see that people 12,000 years ago were already selecting. They gathered certain stands of grain, those with larger seeds or ones that held their seeds longer before shattering. This unintentional selection, repeated over generations, set the stage for domestication. Without planning it, humans began to shape plants. Still, mysteries remain. Did people at this stage sow seeds intentionally, or did they simply gather from the wild each year? Evidence suggests that true cultivation, deliberately planting grain, came slightly later, perhaps around 10,000 years ago. Yet hints of early planting may be present. Some archaeologists argue that disturbed soil near settlements shows deliberate scattering of seeds. Others believe the evidence is too faint to be certain. The line between gathering and farming is blurred, and this blur is part of the story. At the planetary scale, the role of grains is immense. Grass species dominate much of Earth's ecosystems. They grow quickly, adapt to diverse soils, and spread over wide areas. For humans, they represent concentrated energy that can be stored and transported. In the Fertile Crescent, wild barley and wheat happen to be especially rich in nutrients and relatively easy to process. In China, wild millet and rice would later serve a similar role. In the Americas, maize would emerge from teosinte. But here, in this arc of land, the first steps toward cereal use were taken. The choice of grain among all plants would reshape human destiny. The act of grinding also reshapes daily rhythm. Instead of eating food raw or roasted, people invest time in preparing it. Hours are spent each day crushing seeds into flour. The repetitive sound of stone against stone becomes part of camp life. Children watch and learn the skill, passing it on. Such tasks strengthen the sense of continuity and tradition. In the simple act of grinding, humans begin to live by cycles not only of seasons, but of daily labor tied to food, storage, and preparation. Grains also change how food is shared. A roasted gazelle haunch can be eaten quickly by those present, but flour and bread can be divided into portions, stored, and carried. This new flexibility alters social life. Food becomes easier to share in ritual meals, to gift, or to save for lean times. In this way, grains help build not only survival, but community bonds. Archaeological remains reveal storage pits dug into the ground, sometimes lined with stone or plaster. Within them, charred grains have been found, preserved for thousands of years. These pits show that people thought beyond the immediate moment. They planned for the future, preparing against scarcity. The presence of storage suggests foresight, patience, and a new sense of security. But with these changes came challenges. Stored grain attracts pests, mice, insects, and mold. Protecting supplies required vigilance, and sometimes smoke from fires was used to deter intruders. These struggles show the early costs of abundance. Once people invested in gathered stores, they had to defend them. This tension foreshadows the complexity of village life, where food security depends on cooperation and protection. One intriguing detail is the presence of stone sickles with gloss along their edges. This sheen is caused by silica from cut grasses polishing the flint. The gloss is evidence of repeated harvesting, proof that people cut grain systematically. Some of these sickle blades are set into wooden handles with resin, forming tools remarkably similar to later farming equipment. They represent not just opportunistic gathering, but deliberate harvesting on a scale that suggests planning and organization. The mystery of why humans first invested so heavily in grain remains open. Was it because changing climate reduced other food sources, forcing reliance on seeds? Was it because gatherings of large groups for rituals required stable food supplies? Or was it because grains offered a form of security that no other wild food could match? The answer may lie in a combination of all three. What is clear is that by this time, grain had become central to human life in the Fertile Crescent. As the sun sets over the hills, families gather around fires. Beside them, baskets of grain rest, and grinding stones lie ready. The air carries the smell of roasted seeds, perhaps simple bread baked on hot flat stones. These small acts, so ordinary, so repetitive, signal one of the greatest transitions in human history. From the humble grinding of wild grasses will grow the fields, farms, and civilizations of the future. Around the hearths of early human camps, another presence begins to appear. It is not the wild deer, nor the shifting herds of gazelle, but an animal that comes closer and stays. Wolves, drawn first by the smell of food, scraps and bones, linger at the edge of firelight. Some snarl and vanish, but others remain. Over generations, the relationship between humans and wolves changes. 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent and beyond, the earliest domesticated dogs emerge. Their place beside the hearth marks a transformation not only in animal life, but in human society. The process is gradual. At first, wolves scavenge from the waste of human camps. The boldest come closer, feeding on bones discarded after feasts or gnawing scraps left at the edge of the settlement. Those less aggressive, more tolerant of people, survive near the fires. Humans, in turn, notice that these animals bark when strangers approach, or follow scents that humans cannot detect. Slowly, an alliance forms. It is not planned, not deliberate, but shaped by mutual advantage. Wolves gain food and protection, humans gain early warning, companionship, and aid in hunting. Archaeological traces of this bond are found in burials. At sites such as Ain Malaha in the Levant, a woman was buried with a puppy, her hand resting on its body. The grave is dated to about 12,000 years ago, suggesting that dogs were already more than camp followers. They were companions, woven into human life and memory. Other sites reveal dog remains with signs of careful treatment, suggesting they were valued beyond utility. The evidence of bones also reveals changes in the animals themselves. Early dogs differ from wolves in skull shape and size. Their snouts shorten slightly, their bodies become smaller, and their teeth show less wear from heavy bone crushing. These changes suggest generations of selective survival among wolves that lived near humans. Over time, a new form emerges, not wolf, not fully tamed, but dog. One lesser-known detail is the pattern of cut marks on animal bones found in settlements. Some gazelle remains show butchery, consistent with hunting aided by dogs, such as carcasses brought down in coordinated drives. This hints at cooperation. Dogs running to chase herds, humans striking with arrows or spears. Together, they achieve what neither could as efficiently alone. The partnership reshapes hunting strategies, broadening the scope of what groups can secure. Yet mysteries remain. Where exactly were dogs first domesticated? Genetic studies point to multiple regions, perhaps in Eurasia, as early as 20,000 years ago, with secondary centers in the Near East. The bones at Fertile Crescent sites show that by 12,000 years ago, dogs were firmly part of human life here. But whether they were first tamed in this region or brought by migrating groups is still debated. The answer may be complex. Domestication could have happened in more than one place, converging into the dogs we know today. At the planetary scale, the domestication of dogs is extraordinary. No other animal joins humans so early or so closely. While goats, sheep, and cattle will later be tamed, they remain resources to be herded or milked. Dogs become something different: companions, guardians, hunters, symbols. Their bond with humans is emotional as well as practical. It is one of the earliest examples of interspecies cooperation shaping both partners' evolution. The presence of dogs alters the rhythm of daily life. At night, when families sleep in huts or under shelters, dogs keep watch. Their hearing and smell extend human senses, detecting danger long before it arrives. When predators or strangers approach, their barking alerts the camp. This added security allows humans to sleep more deeply, strengthening the sense of safety around the hearth. Dogs also influence mobility. They can help carry small loads, follow trail, find game. Their keen sense of smell allows them to track wounded animals. In cold climates, they later pull sleds. In warm ones, they guard flocks. But even in the earliest villages, their role as sentinels and hunters is enough to change the balance of survival. The symbolism of dogs grows alongside their utility. Some burials place them with care, suggesting a sense of identity or spirit. To be buried with a dog may have meant companionship beyond life, or it may have symbolized loyalty and protection. These gestures hint at early spiritual associations that endure into later cultures, where dogs appear as guides or guardians of the dead. The introduction of dogs also reshapes relations with the wild. Wolves are still present, howling on distant ridges, their eyes glinting beyond firelight. To tame their kin is to cross a boundary between wild and domestic. It marks the first step in a broader process of domestication, where humans begin to shape the lives of other species for mutual benefit. From this point forward, the path to herding and farming is easier to imagine. One intriguing archaeological find comes from Bonn Oberkassel in Germany, where a dog was buried with two humans about 14,000 years ago. The dog showed signs of disease but had lived long enough to suggest care. This implies that humans nursed sick animals, keeping them alive despite reduced usefulness. Such behavior reveals emotional bonds, not just practical ties. It shows that even in deep prehistory, compassion shaped the human-dog relationship. Still, mysteries persist. Were early dogs viewed as part of the family, or as useful tools? Did they hunt willingly, or were they trained? The line between wildness and domestication is not sharp. Some dogs may have reverted to wolf-like behavior. Some wolves may have joined human groups. The process was dynamic, fluid, and complex, unfolding over centuries. At a global scale, the spread of dogs mirrors the spread of humans. Wherever people migrate, dogs follow. Into Europe, across Asia, and eventually to the Americas, dogs walk at their side. They adapt to tundra, desert, forest, and steppe, just as humans do. They become not only the first domesticated species, but the first to join humans in reshaping ecosystems. Together, they alter hunting patterns, drive some prey species harder, and shift the balance of predators. In the Fertile Crescent, the presence of dogs near the hearth foreshadows the permanence of villages. The fire is no longer just a circle of warmth for humans. It is a shared space watched over by animals who have chosen to stay. The bond between species deepens the sense of place. Where dogs guard, humans feel at home. As evening falls over early campings, the sound of barking carries through the valley. Families sit near the flames, grinding grain, roasting meat, telling stories. Just beyond the light, a dog lies curled, ears alert, eyes half closed. This simple image of people and dogs together by fire is one of the oldest and most enduring in human history. From this companionship grows a new dimension of community, one that will last to the present day. In the valleys of the Fertile Crescent, after seasons of return and gathering, people begin to shape more than tools and grinding stones. They shape places to live. 12,000 years ago, the first fragile huts of mud and reed rise from the earth. These are not grand buildings, nor permanent houses of stone, but they signal a new step. For the first time, humans who once wandered freely across landscapes begin to build structures that remain when they move away, waiting for their return. These huts are the seeds of permanence. The construction is simple yet effective. Along riverbanks, reeds grow in tall, flexible stands. When bundled together, they form walls or roofs. Mud, mixed with straw, can be packed onto reed frames to create insulation. Branches from nearby trees serve as posts. Stones hold down mats or form low foundations. With these materials, families raise round huts, each only a few meters across. They provide shelter from rain, shade from sun, and a barrier against wind. Their rounded shape helps resist collapse, while their low walls keep warmth in when nights grow cold. At archaeological sites such as Jerf el Ahmar and Mureybit, post holes and impressions of reed mats preserve the traces of these structures. In some places, plaster floors remain, smooth and pale, showing that people took time to prepare surfaces carefully. The effort is striking. To plaster a floor requires gathering lime, heating it, mixing it with water, and spreading it evenly. Such work is not for a camp that will be abandoned after a week. It reflects the expectation of return. The act of building huts also signals a change in rhythm. No longer does every shelter vanish when a group moves. Some structures remain, waiting to be repaired or reused. This continuity makes return easier. Families can find the same place season after season, repairing walls, patching roofs, and renewing fires. Over time, huts accumulate layers of use. Archaeologists uncover floors built atop earlier ones, suggesting continuity across generations. A lesser-known detail is the presence of small storage pits found beneath or beside huts. Some are lined with plaster, others with stone. They held grain, nuts, or dried meat. To bury food under the floor is to invest in the future, to assume that people will come back. It ties the survival of a family to the space of the hut itself. In this way, architecture and food storage reinforce one another, deepening the sense of settlement. Still, mysteries remain. Were these huts used year-round, or only in certain seasons? The evidence suggests both. Some settlements show signs of long-term occupation, with thick debris layers, hearths renewed many times, and heavy grinding stones too cumbersome to move. Others suggest shorter stays, with lighter structures rebuilt after absence. Archaeologists debate whether these huts were steps toward full villages or simply improved seasonal camps. The truth may lie in between. Structures that began as seasonal shelters slowly grew into permanent homes. At the planetary scale, the act of building huts marks a profound transition. Humans everywhere have long built temporary shelters, lean-tos of branches, tents of animal hides, snow houses of ice. But in the Fertile Crescent, huts of mud and reed mark one of the first times humans create architecture that endures beyond a season. This change mirrors the broader shift of the Holocene. As climates stabilize, humans stabilize their homes. The presence of huts also changes social life. In a camp of simple shelters, families can scatter loosely, but huts arranged in clusters form a pattern. Paths emerge between doorways, shared spaces open between walls. The layout of huts begins to shape community interaction. People pass one another more often, share fires, and coordinate tasks. The very structure of living space encourages cooperation. The circular form of huts has meaning too. A circle gathers people inward, creating intimacy. In many early sites, huts are built with entrances facing east, toward the rising sun, or toward shared courtyards. Such choices may reflect practical needs, light, warmth, or wind direction, but they may also reflect symbolic preferences. The alignment of huts with one another suggests planning beyond the needs of a single family. One fascinating archaeological detail comes from the site of Ain Malaha, also known as Ainan, in the Levant. There, huts built of stone foundations and reed superstructures date back to around 12,000 years ago. Some of them measure up to 10 meters across, far larger than simple family shelters. Their size suggests communal use, perhaps for extended families or group gatherings. The durability of stone bases also shows a step beyond reed and mud, the beginnings of architecture meant to last. With huts come hearths. In nearly every excavated structure, a central fire pit lies on the floor. Around it, ash layers build up, sometimes centimeters thick. Stones ring the fire, holding heat and supporting pots or roasting sticks. The hearth is the heart of the hut, where grain is baked into bread, meat is roasted, and warmth is shared. It is also the place where stories are told, knowledge passed, and rituals performed. In this way, huts not only shelter bodies, but also focus community life. The introduction of huts affects the way humans perceive land. A structure left behind becomes a marker. It tells others that this place is claimed, at least temporarily, by a group. The notion of territory begins to take root. It is not yet private property, not yet the fields of later farming villages, but it is a step toward rootedness. The hut stands as a visible sign that humans intend to return, that this valley or river bend is part of their cycle of life. Yet huts are fragile. Reed walls rot, mud plaster cracks, roofs collapse under rain. Maintenance is constant. To keep them standing requires effort, and to abandon them for too long means losing them to the elements. This fragility reflects the delicate balance of early settlement. Humans are experimenting, testing whether they can live not just with nature, but in structures of their own making. At night, the sight of huts scattered across a valley must have been striking. Small circles of light from hearths glow through reed walls, smoke drifting upward into the dark. Dogs bark near entrances. Children sleep on mats, and grain rests in pits beneath the floor. Outside, the wild still dominates, Jackals howl, gazelle move, owls hunt. But inside the huts, humans carve out spaces of safety and continuity. The first huts of mud and reed are not yet villages, but they are more than camps. They are experiments in permanence, the fragile beginnings of architecture that will one day rise into towns and cities. In their simple forms, built from the earth itself, they mark humanity's first attempt to make home a place that endures. On the banks of rivers and at the edges of fertile valley, clusters of huts begin to gather. What were once scattered shelters now stand close together, forming the outlines of a community. 12,000 years ago, in places like Jericho in the Jordan Valley, the first known village takes shape. These villages are not yet cities, not yet dense with walls and streets, but they mark the first moment when humans choose to live side by side, season after season, in numbers large enough to create something new. The choice of location is deliberate. Villages rise where water is reliable, where springs flow year-round, or where rivers run steadily even in dry months. Jericho, for example, sits near the spring of Ain es-Sultan, a constant source of fresh water in a landscape otherwise marked by arid hills. This abundance makes settlement possible. It also makes it necessary to stay, for the spring cannot be carried away, only visited and used. In this way, geography dictates the growth of community. The huts of early villages resemble those of seasonal camps, round, built of reed and mud, plastered floors, smoothed with care. But here they stand in numbers, side by side, clustered into small groups. Between them lie shared spaces where fires burn, where tools are repaired, where food is prepared together. The arrangement creates a sense of belonging to a larger whole. Families are no longer only part of a group of wanderers. They are neighbors, connected through the layout of huts. Archaeological excavations at Jericho reveal layers of occupation stretching back thousands of years. At the earliest levels, archaeologists have uncovered plaster floors, circular houses, and storage pits dug beneath walls. These remains suggest not temporary use but long-term residence. People invested in their homes, repairing and rebuilding them, smoothing new plaster over old surfaces. The effort shows commitment. It reflects a new relationship with land, not only to gather from it, but to inhabit it. One lesser-known detail from Jericho is the evidence of early communal structures. In addition to small huts, there are larger buildings, perhaps used for gatherings or rituals. Their size exceeds what a single family would require, suggesting that community events, feasts, or ceremonies took place inside. This hints that from the start, villages were more than clusters of houses. They were places where shared identity was forged, not only through daily life but through ritual and gathering. The rhythm of life in the village differs from that of seasonal camps. Days begin with tending hearths, grinding grain, and repairing huts. Hunters still leave to track gazelle, while gatherers collect fruits, nuts, and reeds. But in the village, work is shared more visibly. Children play together in open spaces. Dogs watch over doorways. Women grind grain side by side, their hands wearing down the same heavy stones. Men return from hunting to shared fires. The closeness of living alters the pace of interaction. Life becomes more communal, less scattered. Still, mysteries surround these earliest villages. How many people lived together at one time? Estimates for Jericho's earliest settlements suggest only a few hundred. Yet even this number is striking, for never before had so many humans chosen to remain together in one place. What drew them to accept the challenges of crowding, noise, disputes, disease, when mobility offered freedom? Some archaeologists argue that ritual spaces anchored them, that the presence of shared ceremonies outweighed difficulties. Others emphasize the security of food storage or the protection offered by larger groups. The truth may lie in all these factors combined. At the planetary scale, villages represent a turning point in human ecology. For millennia, humans shaped their environment lightly, moving with the seasons. Now, by gathering in villages, they concentrate impact. Trees are cut more frequently for building and firewood. Game near settlements is hunted more heavily. Plants close to huts are trampled, reshaped into paths and courtyards. Slowly, the landscape begins to bear the marks of continuous human presence. This shift foreshadows the transformation of ecosystems that farming will bring. One fascinating detail comes from the plastered floors of Jericho's houses. The plaster was made by heating limestone to create lime, then mixing it with water. This process requires high heat, achieved only by sustained burning of wood. The effort to produce smooth, durable floors shows not only technical skill but also organization. Gathering enough fuel, managing fires, and applying plaster in layers all suggest coordinated work. These floors are among the earliest examples of humans reshaping raw material into lasting architecture. Another remarkable feature at Jericho is the presence of a stone tower, built several centuries later but rooted in this same tradition of permanence. Standing over 8 meters tall, with an internal staircase, it suggests defense, storage, or ritual. While it postdates the first huts, it demonstrates how quickly the idea of collective construction grew once people lived in villages. The impulse to build larger, shared structures began early. Living in villages also changes social patterns, and when families reside side by side, disputes over space, food, or resources must be managed. Rules of sharing and cooperation begin to form. Elders may mediate conflicts, rituals may reinforce unity, and gatherings may resolve tensions. These social structures are invisible in the soil, but they are implied by the very fact that hundreds of people live together without dispersing. Villages demand new forms of organization, the first seeds of governance. The closeness of living also brings new risk. Waste accumulates, attracting pests. Diseases can spread more easily when people live close together. Archaeological evidence from skeletons suggests that early villagers suffered more from tooth decay than mobile foragers, likely due to increased grain consumption. These challenges reflect the costs of permanence. Yet despite them, the village endures, suggesting that its benefits outweighed its burdens. The act of clustering huts by the river also alters the sense of time. A camp is built for a season, then abandoned. A village is built with the expectation of continuity. Each year, repairs are made, new huts rise where old ones fell, and children grow up in the same place their parents did. Generations overlap in ways never possible when wandering. Memory becomes tied not only to people, but to location. The land itself becomes history. In the quiet evenings of the first villages, the sound of grinding stones carries across courtyards. Smoke drifts upward from multiple hearths, mingling into the sky. Children chase one another between huts. Dogs bark at shadows, and elders sit near the fire, watching. The river flows steadily nearby, reflecting the moon. This is no longer a temporary camp, but a place of return. of continuity, of belonging. It is the first known village, small and fragile, but the beginning of a new human world. Inside the earliest villages, daily life centers on the hearth. The fire is not only a source of warmth or a tool for cooking. It is the anchor of the household, the heart of the dwelling, the place where family and neighbors gather. 12,000 years ago, the shared hearth transforms the rhythm of life, shaping how people cook, eat, and interact. Around the fire, the first steady patterns of communal meals emerge, binding individuals together in a new way. The hearth sits usually in the center of a round hut. Archaeologists uncover blackened circles of ash, layers of charcoal, and stones cracked by heat. Some hearths are lined with clay to retain warmth and protect the floor beneath. Others are ringed by stones, creating a stable platform for cooking. Beside them lie fragments of bones, charred seeds, and broken tools. These traces tell the story of countless meals prepared and consumed in the same place, season after season. Food preparation begins with grain. After harvesting wild barley or einkorn, families grind the seeds into coarse flour using querns. The grinding is slow, repetitive, and physically demanding. Hours each day are spent in this task. The flour is mixed with water, then baked on flat stones placed near the fire. Archaeologists have discovered residues of starches on ancient grinding tools, confirming the process. The result is flatbread, simple, nourishing, and easily shared. Bread, in this sense, becomes one of the first communal foods, breaking the pattern of individual portions. Meat from hunting adds variety. Gazelle or ox and wild boar are roasted over flames or boiled in skin bags filled with water and heated stones. Bones found near hearths show cut marks and burning, evidence of roasting and marrow extraction. Fish from rivers, birds from nearby wetlands, and hares from the fields supplement diets. The combination of grain and meat creates meals that are more diverse and reliable than those of earlier foraging camps. The hearth becomes the place where these foods are transformed into nourishment. One lesser-known detail lies in the discovery of plant remains, such as lentils, peas, and bitter vetch in early village sites. These pulses, gathered from the wild, are cooked in hearths alongside grain. Pulses provide protein that complements cereal diets, forming an early version of a balanced food system. Their presence shows that even before full farming began, people recognized the value of combining different plants. The hearth, where all these foods met, thus represents not just cooking, but the beginning of cuisine. The act of eating together also reshapes social bonds. In small mobile bands, meals were often quick and improvised. In villages, they become structured events. Families sit together around a hearth, sharing bread and meat. Neighbors visit one another, bringing food as gifts or contributions to larger feasts. Archaeological evidence of large hearths in communal spaces suggests that entire groups sometimes gathered for shared meals. Such gatherings reinforce unity, smooth over conflicts, and create memories of collective life. Still, mysteries remain. How much of village food was gathered communally, and how much was managed by individual households? Did families guard their stores closely, or was food widely shared? The evidence is partial. Storage pits suggest private control, yet the presence of communal hearths suggests collective feasting. Archaeologists debate whether early villages leaned more toward cooperation or competition. The hearth sits at the center of this puzzle, embodying both intimacy and community. And at the planetary scale, the communal hearth marks a shift in how humans interact with fire. For hundreds of thousands of years, fire had been mobile, lit at camps, carried as embers, abandoned when groups moved on. In villages, fire becomes permanent. Hearths are maintained continuously, their flames guarded and fed. This permanence creates a rhythm of life tied to place. Smoke rises daily from the same huts, carrying scents of bread and roasting meat. Fire becomes not just a tool of survival, but a defining feature of settled life. The sharing of food also influences ritual. Some archaeologists argue that feasting was a key factor in the growth of villages. Evidence from Göbekli Tepe and other sites shows large gatherings accompanied by mass animal hunts. The meat from these hunts would have been roasted and shared, requiring organized cooking and distribution. Such feasts may have been tied to rituals, alliances, or seasonal ceremonies. The hearth, in this context, is not just domestic but sacred, linking survival to meaning. The hearth also reshapes time. Grain grinding and bread baking require hours of labor, repeated daily. Fire must be maintained, ashes cleared, wood gathered. These routines create a sense of steady rhythm, different from the unpredictable hunts of nomadic life. Work becomes divided. Some tend the hearth, others gather fuel, others hunt or collect plants. These divisions reinforce cooperation within families and villages. They also create continuity, as children grow up watching and learning the same tasks. One intriguing archaeological detail comes from plastered hearths at early Neolithic sites. Some were decorated with red ochre, suggesting symbolic significance beyond function. Others contained carefully arranged stones, perhaps marking ritual use. In some cases, hearths were rebuilt in the exact same spot over generations, layering ash upon ash until thick deposits formed. This repetition suggests that hearths were not merely practical, but central to identity. A house without its hearth would not have been complete. The risks of fire are present too. In villages where huts stand close together, sparks and flames can spread quickly. Archaeological evidence shows burned layers where entire clusters of houses were destroyed by fire, whether accidental or intentional. Such events remind us of the danger that comes with permanence. Yet the risk did not deter people from maintaining hearths. Their benefits outweighed their hazards. At night, the hearth creates a different world. Flames flicker on plastered walls, shadows dance, and the crackle of wood fills the silence. Families gather close, sheltered from the darkness outside. Dogs lie near the entrance, ears alert. The glow of fire extends human senses, pushing back night. In these moments, the hearth is more than heat and light. It is safety, memory, and belonging. Communal meals define the identity of the village. Bread is broken, meat is shared, pulses are cooked into stews. Children taste the same foods their parents ate, linking generations through flavor and ritual. Neighbors join in feasts, reinforcing alliances. The hearth becomes the place where social life is enacted, where community is renewed daily. From this pattern of shared fires and shared meals grows something enduring. It is not yet farming, not yet the complex economy of later civilizations, but it is the beginning of a settled food system. The hearth transforms food from chance into certainty, from individual into communal. Around its glow, the first villages take root, and with them, the rhythms of human society that continue to this day. Within the earliest villages of the Fertile Crescent, beneath the plastered floors of round huts, lie the remains of the dead. This practice, known from sites such as Jericho, Sayonu, and Ain Malaha, reveals a striking change in how humans 12,000 years ago treated their departed. Instead of leaving bodies exposed on hillsides or buried far from camp, villagers placed their dead directly beneath their homes. Life and death were joined in the same space. The walls of daily existence stood literally above the bones of ancestors. Archaeologists uncover these burials as carefully dug pits beneath house floors. The bodies are often placed flexed, with knees drawn up to the chest, sometimes wrapped or covered in mats. After burial, the floor is plastered smooth again, sealing the dead within the living space. Over time, multiple burials accumulate under a single hut, layers of human history beneath layers of plaster. This continuity suggests deep meaning, a deliberate connection between the living and the dead. Why did people choose to bury their dead inside houses? One explanation is remembrance. By placing ancestors beneath the floor, families kept them close, ensuring that memory and presence endured. Each time the floor was plastered, each time the hearth was lit, the dead remained part of daily life. Another explanation points to ritual. Burial may have sanctified the home, binding it with protection. The truth may combine both. The ancestors provided both memory and spiritual security. A lesser-known detail is that some skulls were removed from bodies after burial. At sites such as Jericho, archaeologists have found plastered skulls, human heads carefully taken from the grave, coated with plaster to recreate facial features, and sometimes painted with ochre. Shells were inserted for eyes, creating lifelike masks. These skulls were then kept within houses or communal spaces. Such treatment suggests veneration of ancestors, perhaps even an early form of portraiture. It is one of the earliest known examples of humans reshaping the remains of the dead into enduring symbols. This practice raises profound mysteries. Why were some skulls plastered while others were not? Did they represent family leaders, shamans, or beloved elders? Were they meant as reminders of lineage, or as ritual objects connecting the living to unseen realms? Archaeologists debate the meaning, for no written records exist. The skulls stare back across millennia, silent but powerful, embodying questions we cannot yet answer. At the planetary scale, the practice of burying the dead beneath homes signals a universal human theme: the effort to connect life with memory. In Europe, cave burials had long linked bodies with places of ritual art. In Africa, graves with beads and ochre spoke of respect for the dead. But in the Fertile Crescent, the placement of bodies beneath daily living spaces brings remembrance into the very center of ordinary life. It transforms the house from mere shelter into a vessel of lineage. The act of burial also reshapes how villages perceive space. A house is no longer only a shelter, it becomes a tomb as well. To abandon a hut means leaving behind not only belongings but ancestors. This ties families more tightly to place, making departure difficult. The village becomes not just a collection of huts, but a sacred landscape, layered with generations. Memory and soil intertwine. One fascinating archaeological observation comes from the wear on plaster floors. In some houses, plaster was renewed many times, each layer sealing in the dead below. The act of plastering thus became both practical maintenance and ritual gesture, reaffirming bonds between living and dead. Every step across the floor echoed over ancestors. Every hearth fire burned above bones. The presence of burials also influenced community identity. When ancestors were interred beneath homes, houses themselves became symbols of lineage. Neighboring families could trace their heritage to the ground underfoot. This created new concepts of belonging, rooted not only in the living, but in those who had lived before. Villages thus became not just places of shelter, but repositories of memory, anchoring social life in continuity across generations. Still, mysteries surround the removal of skulls. Some villages display clusters of plastered skulls in communal areas, suggesting shared ancestor cults. Others show skulls kept in houses, implying more private veneration. The diversity raises questions about hierarchy. Were certain individuals elevated as leaders, remembered more visibly? Or did skulls represent collective ancestry, shared by the whole community? The lack of consistent patterns leaves the question open. At the planetary scale, this innovation foreshadows later practices across the world. Ancestor worship will appear in many cultures, from East Asia to Africa to the Americas. The idea that the dead continue to influence the living is among humanity's most enduring beliefs. In the Fertile Crescent, 12,000 years ago, we see one of its earliest known expressions. Daily life continued above these graves. Families cooked bread, roasted meat, raised children, and repaired huts, all while the bones of their ancestors lay beneath them. Dogs barked at night, children played in courtyards, fires glowed in hearths, yet under the plaster, the silent presence of the dead remained. This juxtaposition shaped a worldview in which life and death were not separate, but woven together. The skulls, with their plastered faces and shell eyes, may have stared during rituals. Archaeologists imagine gatherings where villagers brought out these ancestral heads, displaying them during feasts or ceremonies. Firelight, flickering on white plaster, would have created a striking scene. The presence of the dead, in visible form, may have guided decisions, strengthened unity, or warned against forgetting origins. The risks of disease from burial within houses must also be considered. Some archaeologists suggest that shallow graves beneath floors may have contributed to health problems, though plaster ceiling reduced exposure. This tension between reverence and risk highlights the complexity of early settlement. The villagers balanced practical needs with spiritual beliefs, choosing memory even when it carried danger. In the quiet of the village, beneath layers of plaster and ash, the dead remained part of the living community. Their presence gave weight to the huts, binding families to place. Their skulls, reshaped into faces of plaster, gave the community tangible symbols of continuity. From this practice, we glimpse how humans first sought to weave memory into the fabric of daily life. The burials beneath the floors remind us that the first villages were not only experiments in food and shelter, but in meaning. They mark the dawn of a human tradition that endures across cultures, the desire to keep ancestors close, to remember them not as distant, but as part of every day. Amid the huts and hearths of the first villages, not all objects are practical tools or remains of meals. Some are carved, etched, or shaped with deliberate care, holding meaning beyond use. 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, humans begin to leave behind symbols on stone and bone. These designs, animals, and geometric figures reveal new dimensions of thought. They suggest that the communities who built villages also built systems of meaning, carried in symbols that outlast their makers. Archaeologists uncover limestone pebbles incised with crosshatches, zigzags, and spirals. They find animal figures carved into bone tools or stone plaques, gazelle, aurochs, foxes, and birds. Some designs are abstract, repeating lines that may represent counting, ownership, or ritual marks. Others are more figurative, capturing the shapes of creatures that filled daily life. These marks are not random scratches, but deliberate acts. They show that humans of this era invested time in creating symbols, even when survival alone might have seemed the priority. At Göbekli Tepe, monumental stone pillars carry elaborate carvings of animals, snakes winding upward, vultures spreading wings, foxes leaping. These are not decorations for homes, but statements in stone. Though Göbekli Tepe dates slightly later, it belongs to the same cultural horizon as early villages. The imagery there suggests that the impulse to carve meaning into stone was widespread. Villagers likely carried similar ideas into their smaller settlements, carving on portable items such as plaques and figurines. A lesser-known detail is the discovery of pierced stones and bones that may have been worn as pendants or beads. Some are simple discs, others bear lines or dots. Worn smooth by handling, they suggest personal adornment. Such objects may have been symbols of identity, affiliation, or protection. The act of carrying symbols on the body marks a step beyond communal memory. It personalizes meaning, linking it to the individual. The presence of symbols raises questions. What did they signify? Were the carvings of animals markers of clans, each group identifying with a creature? Were geometric designs early forms of notation, perhaps for keeping track of food, seasons, or exchanges? Or were they purely ritual expressions of belief in unseen powers? Archaeologists cannot yet answer. The ambiguity is itself revealing, showing how little we know of the earliest symbolic systems. At the planetary scale, the emergence of symbols is part of a longer human story. In Africa, ochre pieces with engraved lines appear over 70,000 years ago. In Europe, cave paintings depict animals in vivid detail. But in the Fertile Crescent, symbols become part of daily village life. They are not hidden in caves but carried into houses, hearths, and courtyards. They are woven into the fabric of community rather than kept apart in remote, ritual spaces. This shift foreshadows the eventual rise of writing, when symbols will become the foundation of communication and record. The act of carving itself carries meaning. To etch lines into stone requires time, patience, and tools. It is not done casually. In communities where survival still demands effort, the choice to carve suggests that meaning is as vital as food. These symbols may have been used to teach, to remember, or to unify. They show that thought had begun to extend beyond the immediate needs of hunting and gathering. One fascinating archaeological observation comes from the use of red ochre in decoration. At sites in the Levant, ochre stains appear on bones and stones, suggesting it was applied deliberately. Red pigment, associated with life and blood, may have symbolized vitality or renewal. Its use on symbolic objects connects daily life with ideas of meaning and transformation. This continuity links the Fertile Crescent to much older traditions of symbolic use across the globe. Still, mysteries endure. Why do some villages yield abundant symbolic objects, while others show few? Was symbolism central to all communities, or did certain groups place greater emphasis on it? Were symbols widely understood across regions, Or did each village have its own set of meanings? Archaeologists debate these questions, piecing together fragments of a symbolic system that has no surviving key. Symbols also reshape social interaction. A carved stone, recognizable by its patterns, could mark belonging to a group. A pendant worn on the body could signal alliance or distinction. These markers may have helped maintain identity in villages where many families lived close together. As populations grew, symbols may have provided ways to navigate complexity, distinguishing one group from another, one role from another. Another intriguing detail lies in small figurines found in early settlements. Some are simple human shapes, carved from clay or stone. Others depict animals. Their purpose is unclear: toys, ritual objects, teaching tools? The ambiguity leaves room for many interpretations. What is certain is that people invested time and care in creating them, embedding ideas into material form. At the planetary scale, these early symbols represent the beginning of humanity's external memory. Until now, memory had been held in stories, rituals, and songs. Now, marks on stone and bone carry meaning beyond the moment of speech. They endure when the storyteller dies, when the fire goes out. They allow ideas to persist across generations, unmoored from voice. Though not yet writing, this is the first step toward it. The integration of symbols into village life also changes the experience of home. A hut with carved plaques or decorated stones becomes more than shelter. It becomes a space of meaning, marked with reminders of identity, ancestry, or belief. To step into such a hut is to step into a world shaped not only by walls and hearths, but by ideas embodied in objects. Still, we must admit what we do not know. Did the villagers themselves see these symbols as sacred or as ordinary? Were they used every day or only in special rituals? The evidence does not tell us. What it does tell us is that the impulse to make symbols was strong enough to leave traces across millennia. That impulse is one of the defining traits of our species. In the quiet of an early village, a child might pick up a small carved stone, running fingers over its grooves. The lines connect her to ancestors who made them, to ideas carried through generations. In that moment, meaning passes invisibly, silently, across time. The symbols on stone and bone remind us that humans were not only building huts and grinding grain, but also shaping the unseen world of thought. Word count 1089. Awaiting continue. Banjan noi. Hai viet ju tisint azensto to cho section 12 chat GPT janoi. Section 12. In the small villages of the Fertile Crescent, the relationship between humans and plants deepens. For thousands of years, people had gathered wild seeds, fruits, and pulses, storing them in pits and grinding them into flour. But now, around 12,000 years ago, something subtle begins to change. Humans start to interfere in the life cycle of plants, not by accident alone, but by returning to the same patches, scattering seeds, and perhaps clearing land. These are the first hints of cultivation, the earliest seeds of farming. The process is not sudden. It unfolds slowly, across generations. A family might notice that seeds dropped near their huts sprout the following season. A group might deliberately shake grain heads over soil near camp, hoping to see new shoots emerge. Others might pull weeds from favored patches, making space for cereals to grow thicker. Each small act is minor on its own, but together they mark a turning point. humans begin to shape plants, and plants begin to shape humans. Archaeological evidence supports this transition. At sites such as Abu Huraira and Jerf el Ahmar, charred grains of barley and wheat show changes over time. Early wild cereals shattered easily, their seeds scattering when ripe. But by about 10 to 11,000 years ago, more non-shattering varieties appear in the record. These plants held their seeds longer, making them easier to harvest. Such traits did not emerge by chance alone. They resulted from human gathering. Seeds that shattered were lost, while seeds that clung were collected and replanted. Step by step, humans guided evolution without knowing it. Grinding stones, sickle blades, and storage pits all point to increased reliance on cereals. The sheen on flint sickle edges, produced by repeated contact with silica-rich grasses, reveals systematic harvesting. In some villages, large communal grinding slabs suggest organized processing of grain for many people. The scale of activity indicates that cereals were no longer just one food among many, but a central resource around which daily life revolved. A lesser-known detail lies in the remains of legumes found alongside grains. Lentils, peas, and bitter vetch were gathered, boiled, and eaten with bread. Pulses add protein, complementing the carbohydrates of cereals. Archaeologists find charred lentils in hearths and storage pits, evidence that people deliberately stored them. The combination of cereals and pulses represents one of the earliest balanced diets shaped by human planning. It shows that food choices were thoughtful, not random. Still, mysteries surround these beginnings of farming. Did people intentionally sow seeds in prepared plots? Or did they simply encourage natural stands by protecting them? Were villages already cultivating crops? Or were they still primarily gathering wild plants? Some archaeologists argue that true agriculture began later, around 10,000 years ago. Others see the evidence of early cultivation in disturbed soils and changing plant traits. The line between gathering and farming blurs. Perhaps it is best understood not as a sudden shift, but as a long continuum of experimentation. At the planetary scale, the Fertile Crescent was not alone. In the Yangtze Valley of China, early rice gathering and cultivation began around the same time. In the Americas, wild squash and beans were used. In New Guinea, taro and yams entered human diets. But the Fertile Crescent stands out because of the combination of cereals and pulses, supported by herds of gazelle and later sheep and goats. This mix created a foundation strong enough to support larger, more permanent villages. The act of tending plants also reshaped social life. Planting, weeding, and harvesting required cooperation across families. Unlike hunting, which could be done in small groups, agriculture demanded larger coordination. Entire villages might gather for harvest, sharing labor and food. This cooperation fostered stronger bonds but also new tensions, for disputes over plots or stored grain could arise. The seeds of farming were also the seeds of social complexity. One fascinating archaeological observation comes from plastered bins and silos within early villages. At sites like Jericho, remains of storage containers lined with lime plaster show that people were stockpiling grain for future use. This step reflects not just gathering, but planning on a larger scale. With stored food, families could survive lean months, but they also faced the challenge of protecting stores from pests and theft. These challenges foreshadow the systems of ownership and defense that would later shape societies. The domestication of plants also affected landscapes. Repeated harvesting of wild stands reduced seed dispersal, changing plant populations. Clearing land for cultivation altered local ecosystems, favoring some species while eliminating others. Soil was disturbed by digging sticks, water was diverted into plots, and forests near villages were cut for fuel. For the first time, humans began to reshape environments systematically. These small beginnings carried consequences that would eventually transform entire regions. Still, mysteries endure. Why did humans choose cereals, with their laborious processing, over other plants that were easier to eat? Some archaeologists suggest that cereals, with their storability and caloric density, were unmatched. Others argue that social or ritual factors played a role. With bread and beer, yes. There is early evidence for fermented grain drinks becoming central to gatherings and ceremonies. The appeal of cereals may have been cultural as well as nutritional. The rhythm of village life increasingly followed the cycles of plants. Spring meant shoots and new growth, summer meant harvest, autumn meant storage, and winter meant subsistence from reserves. The hearth still burned, dogs still guarded. But now the seasons carried agricultural weight. Children grew up knowing not only the movements of gazelle, but also the growth of grain. Memories stretched not only across generations, but across harvests. At night, as fires glowed in huts, people may have spoken of seeds and growth, of the fields beyond the village. They may have remembered the first times they noticed grain sprouting where none had been sown, or the times when stored food carried them through hard winters. They may have begun to see plants not just as gifts of the wild, but as companions in life, growing as they grew, feeding as they fed. The seeds of farming begin quietly, without ceremony. They grow in the simple act of scattering grain, of noticing which plants thrive, of returning to the same plots each year. Yet from these acts will grow the great fields of the future, the agriculture that sustains billions, the civilizations that rise on grain. In the Fertile Crescent 12,000 years ago, humans take the first steps on that path, guided by seeds small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. The Holocene, the warmer age that follows the Ice Age, is not as stable as it first seems. Even as forests spread and rivers flow with greater regularity, sudden shifts in climate interrupt the rhythm of life. Around 12,000 years ago, during the time of the first villages, a sharp cooling episode unsettles the balance. Known today as the Younger Dryas, it lasts for more than 1,000 years. For the villagers of the Fertile Crescent, its impact is immediate and profound.
Crops fail, wild animals shift their ranges, and uncertainty shapes every season. The first seeds of farming sprout in a world that is not always predictable.
The Younger Dryas begins suddenly. After a period of warming and retreating glaciers, temperatures fall again across much of the northern hemisphere. Ice sheets stabilize and cold winds sweep south. Rainfall patterns change, turning some regions drier, others wetter. For humans who had only just begun to experiment with staying in one place, the disruption tests resilience. Grain stands that once grew thick become sparse. Rivers shrink in some valleys while flooding in others.
Villages that relied on steady cycles find themselves caught in unpredictability.
Archaeological evidence at Abu Huraira captures this shift. Layers of occupation show that as climate cooled, people expanded their use of wild plants, adding a wider range of seeds and fruits to their diet. Charred remains of rye suggest early cultivation attempts, perhaps the first signs of deliberate planting to secure food in harsher conditions. Yet these efforts may have been short-lived. When the Younger Dryas ended, rye cultivation diminished, replaced again by reliance on wild cereals that thrived in warmer conditions. The evidence shows how climate pushed communities to experiment, then reshaped their choices. A lesser-known detail is that gazelle hunting increased dramatically during the Younger Dryas. At sites in the Levant, massive accumulations of gazelle bones appear, suggesting organized hunts of entire herds. This may have been a response to unreliable plant food supplies. By coordinating large-scale hunting drives, villagers secured protein and fat to offset poor harvests. Such hunts required cooperation among many people, strengthening community bonds even as they reflected hardship. The shift in diet reveals how closely tied humans were to the ebb and flow of climate. The planetary causes of the Younger Dryas remain a mystery. Some scientists argue that meltwater from retreating glaciers poured into the North Atlantic, disrupting ocean circulation and cooling the climate. Others suggest a comet or asteroid impact triggered sudden change. The exact cause is still debated. What is certain is that a global event reshaped local lives. In Europe, tundra returned where forests had begun to grow. In North America, large animals such as mammoths and mastodons declined further. In the Fertile Crescent, villagers faced instability in the very moment they were experimenting with permanence. The cooling period shows how fragile early settlements were. Villages depended on predictable cycles of plants and animals. A few poor seasons could strain resources, forcing groups to move or adapt. Yet the very fact that villages endured through the Younger Dryas shows resilience. People did not abandon the idea of staying. Instead, they adjusted. They broadened diets, stored more food, and sought security in numbers. The experiment of settlement survived even when climate turned against it. Still, mysteries surround how communities coped. Did some villages fail and vanish, leaving no trace? Did others migrate to wetter valleys or higher ground? The patchy evidence makes it difficult to know. Archaeologists see continuity in some sites, abandonment in others. The uneven pattern suggests that survival depended on local choices, where water was available, where plants could still grow, where hunting was fruitful. Settlement was not inevitable. It was fragile, contingent on adaptation. At the planetary scale, the Younger Dryas reminds us of the power of sudden change. Even small shifts in temperature or rainfall ripple through ecosystems, altering plant growth, animal migration, and human survival. Today, with vast populations and technology, humans often feel distant from such dependence. But 12,000 years ago, the link was direct and immediate. A dry season could mean hunger. A failed harvest could mean dispersal. Climate was not background, it was the stage on which life played out. The crisis also fostered innovation. The need to secure food pushed experimentation with cultivation, storage, and cooperation. The pressure of uncertainty may have accelerated domestication as humans sought more reliable food sources. Dogs, already companions, became more valuable as hunters and guards. Storage pits grew larger and more common. Social networks expanded, with villages exchanging goods and perhaps people to spread risk. Hardship did not end the story of settlement, it shaped it. One fascinating archaeological observation comes from grinding stones. During the Younger Dryas, their use intensified. Larger, heavier querns appear, suggesting more intensive processing of seeds and grasses. People were harvesting less preferred plants, grinding them into flour to survive. The wear patterns on stones testify to long hours of labor, the daily grind of resilience. These humble artifacts are silent witnesses to the struggle of early villagers against climate uncertainty. Another detail lies in the presence of small-scale irrigation or water management, though true irrigation would come later. Evidence hints that people dug shallow channels to guide water or clear areas for planting. These acts suggest not resignation to climate, but active response. Humans were beginning to alter landscapes to buffer against unpredictability. Even in hardship, the seeds of control over nature were planted. The Younger Dryas ends as abruptly as it begins. Temperatures rise again, rainfall stabilizes, and the Holocene resumes its warmer course. For the Fertile Crescent, this means a return of grasses, richer harvests of wild cereals, and renewed opportunities for settlement. Villages expand once more, and the path toward agriculture accelerates. Yet the memory of instability remains. The experience of sudden change teaches resilience, planning, and caution. It leaves its mark on the choices humans make in the centuries that follow. At night, in these early villages, families sat around hearths, uncertain of what the next season would bring. The stores of grain beneath floors were both comfort and anxiety, enough for now. But would more grow next year? The cold wind outside whispered of change. The silence of forests told of scarcity. Yet fires still burned. Bread was still baked, and dogs still barked at the edges of camp. Life continued, fragile but enduring. The climate shifts of 12,000 years ago remind us that the journey to farming and villages was not a straight line. It was tested by cold, by scarcity, by uncertainty. Yet each challenge pushed humans to adapt, to innovate, to bind themselves more closely to one another and to the land. In the fragile huts of mud and reed, in the worn grooves of grinding stones, in the charred seeds of rye, we see the story of resilience. The seeds of farming begin not only in abundance but in hardship, shaped by the uncertainty of the world. As the Younger Dryas fades and the Holocene warmth stabilizes once more, the scattered huts of the Fertile Crescent begin to coalesce into something new. Villages are no longer only clusters of shelters built for a season. They become complex human environments where houses, storage pits, and ritual spaces stand together. The village itself takes on identity, becoming more than the sum of its parts. For the first time in human history, people inhabit landscapes designed not only by nature but also by their own collective choices. The houses grow sturdier. In place of reed walls alone, mud brick begins to appear. Clay is shaped into blocks, dried in the sun, and stacked into round or oval walls. Roofs remain of reeds and branches, but the foundations are stronger. Plastered floors, smooth and white, continue to be laid, renewed again and again. Each repair ties a family further to the dwelling. To step into such a house is to enter a space marked by years of labor and memory. It is no longer temporary, it is a true home. Villages also develop shared spaces. At sites such as Sayonu in southeastern Anatolia, archaeologists uncover large communal buildings with carefully laid stone floors and benches along the walls. These are not homes for families, but gathering places for the community. Feasts, rituals, or decisions may have taken place inside. The existence of such structures shows that life in villages was organized not only at the level of household, but at the scale of community. A lesser-known detail lies in the presence of special courtyards paved with stones. In some villages, these open spaces contain traces of large-scale feasting, piles of animal bones, ash from great fires, fragments of serving vessels. These signs suggest that villagers came together for celebrations, binding themselves through shared meals and rituals. The village, in this sense, was not only a cluster of homes, but a stage for collective identity. Symbols also proliferate. Carved stones, plastered skulls, and figurines of humans and animals appear in increasing numbers. Some are found in houses, others in communal buildings. Their placement suggests that meaning was distributed across the village, not confined to one sphere. Daily life, ritual, and memory all occupied the same spaces. Houses sheltered families, but they also sheltered ancestors. Communal halls hosted gatherings, but also held symbols of power or belief. Every corner of the village carried layers of significance. Still, mysteries remain. How were decisions made in these early villages? Did elders guide choices? Or did rituals unify people without central leadership? The archaeological record does not provide clear answers. There are no signs yet of palaces or kings, no evidence of rigid hierarchy. Yet the effort required to build communal structures, to organize feasts, and to maintain shared spaces implies coordination. Villages may have been the first laboratories of governance, where humans learn to balance individual needs with collective life. At the planetary scale, the emergence of villages marks a turning point in human interaction with the environment, where once landscapes were shaped primarily by rivers, forests, and herds, they are now reshaped by human intention. Trees are cut in greater numbers for building and fuel. Soil is disturbed repeatedly for planting. Rivers are managed to water crops. The environment is no longer only observed, it is altered. This marks the beginning of a long story in which human settlements become ecosystems of their own. The spatial arrangement of villages also transforms human experience. To live in close quarters with dozens or hundreds of others changes social dynamics. Privacy diminishes, while cooperation increases. Children grow up not only within families, but within the larger web of neighbors. Knowledge spreads quickly, techniques for grinding, building, or planting pass easily from house to house. The village itself becomes a vessel for memory, a place where innovations are preserved and transmitted. One fascinating archaeological observation comes from the sequence of rebuilding in villages like Jericho. Houses are reconstructed on the same foundations for centuries, creating mounds of debris and plaster. Over time, these mounds, called tells, rise above the surrounding landscape. Each layer represents generations of human life, stacked one atop another. The tell is both a practical byproduct of settlement and a monument to continuity. It shows that the village is not a fleeting experiment but a lasting commitment. Another detail lies in the defensive features that appear even at this early stage. At Jericho, a massive stone wall and tower are built around 8000 BCE, only a few centuries after the first settlement. Their purpose is debated. Were they defenses against floods, against rival groups, or symbols of community power? Whatever their function, they demonstrate the capacity of villagers to organize large construction projects. They also reveal how settlement introduced new concerns, security, competition, and boundaries that were less pressing in mobile life. Life in these villages is shaped by routine, yet also by season. The planting and harvest of cereals, the storage of grain, the tending of animals, all follow cycles of the year. Villagers rise with the sun, grind grain at dawn, work fields and gather wood during the day, and gather around hearths at night. But they also mark seasons with rituals, perhaps linked to planting or to the movements of animals. The village thus becomes a place where human time and natural time are woven together. Still, mysteries endure about the inner lives of these communities. Did people see their villages as permanent homes, or as places they might one day leave? Were houses passed from parents to children, or rebuilt by whoever claimed the space? The lack of written records leaves such questions unanswered. What we can see is that villages endured for centuries, suggesting that people saw them as more than temporary. They were not only shelters but identities, places tied to ancestry, ritual, and belonging. At night, the sight of a village must have been striking. Dozens of small fires glowing, smoke rising into the cool air, dogs barking at the edges, and the murmur of voices drifting through the dark. In the stillness beyond, wild animals moved through forests and fields. But inside the circle of huts and walls, humans created their own environment, a microcosm of safety and meaning. The village is a new world. It combines houses, fields, and ritual spaces into a human-made landscape. It transforms survival into society, shelter into community, and memory into architecture. Though fragile compared to later cities, these first villages embody the leap from wandering to dwelling. They mark the threshold of a new human era, one in which place, not path, defines existence. From the first huts clustered near springs to the larger villages with plastered floors and communal halls, humanity stands at a threshold. 12,000 years ago. These settlements do not yet resemble cities, nor do they carry the complexity of states. But they represent a profound change, the beginning of permanent community life. In the Fertile Crescent and beyond, the first villages spread, each one a quiet step toward what we later call civilization. The threshold is visible in the material remains. Houses are rebuilt generation after generation on the same spots, creating tells that rise above the land. Grinding stones wear deep grooves from centuries of use. Storage pits fill and empty, season after season. Burials beneath floors accumulate, layer upon layer of ancestors. Symbols etched on bone and plastered skulls suggest a growing world of belief. These traces are not isolated, they form patterns that speak of endurance to tradition and planning. The village has become a lasting feature of the landscape. Jericho is one of the most striking examples. With its spring-fed water source, it supports hundreds of people. Over time, walls are built, and even a tower of stone rises, one of the earliest known monumental structures. The wall may have been for defense or flood control. The tower may have been a symbol of unity or power. Whatever their function, they show collective labor on a scale not seen before. Villagers coordinated to shape structures that went beyond individual needs. Such feats foreshadow the organization that future cities will require. A lesser-known detail is the evidence of obsidian trade. Volcanic glass from Anatolia is found in Fertile Crescent villages, hundreds of kilometers from its source. This indicates networks of exchange reaching far beyond a single valley. Villages were not isolated, they were nodes in growing webs of connection. Through trade came not only materials but also ideas, techniques, symbols, and stories spreading across regions. The first steps toward interlinked human societies were already underway. The spread of villages also brings challenges. Living close together creates waste, which attracts pests. Archaeological evidence shows higher rates of tooth decay and bone stress in early villages compared to mobile foragers. likely from grain-heavy diets and more demanding labor. Diseases spread more easily in settled communities. Yet despite these drawbacks, the village system expands. Its benefits, security, shared labor, stored food, and communal identity outweigh its costs. Humanity chooses permanence. Still, mysteries remain about how these early villages were governed. Was leadership shared among elders, or did certain families hold greater influence? Were decisions made in communal halls or through informal gatherings around hearths? Archaeologists find no palaces and no signs of kingship, no rigid hierarchy at this stage. The absence suggests that villages were relatively egalitarian, yet the very existence of walls, towers, and feasts implies coordination. How early villages balanced equality and organization is a question that continues to intrigue researchers. At the planetary scale, the rise of villages reshapes ecosystems. Forests are cut back around settlements for wood and space. Wild animals retreat as humans expand hunting and domestication. Plants are cultivated deliberately, their genetics altered by repeated selection. Rivers are managed and soil is turned. Humans begin to create landscapes of their own design, changing the earth more profoundly than ever before. The Anthropocene is still far away, but its first steps begin here, in these modest villages. Villages also alter human identity. To be part of a village is to belong to a place. No longer defined solely by movement, people define themselves by home. Children grow up in the same huts where their grandparents lived. Ancestors lie beneath floors, binding families to soil. Symbols carved on stone or bone express group identity. Ritual gatherings reinforce the sense of unity. From this rootedness grows the idea of community larger than kinship, the first expression of social belonging beyond family ties. One fascinating archaeological observation is the variety of house sizes. In some villages, most dwellings are similar, but a few are larger or built with greater care. This may suggest differences in wealth or status beginning to emerge. While not yet full inequality, these small distinctions hint at changes to come. From modest variation will grow the complex hierarchies of later towns and cities. Another detail lies in the treatment of the dead. Plastered skulls, carefully modeled with features and painted eyes, are often displayed in groups. Some were buried again, others perhaps shown during rituals. This emphasis on ancestors reveals a worldview where the past actively shaped the present. Villagers lived not only with one another, but with the memory of those who came before. Such beliefs may have provided cohesion, guiding the community through challenges. Still, uncertainties endure. Why did some groups choose villages while others continued to roam? Why did some adopt cultivation while others relied on foraging? The archaeological record shows diversity. Settlement was not inevitable everywhere. It emerged in certain regions where climate, resources, and social networks aligned. The Fertile Crescent was one such region, uniquely rich in cereals, pulses, and animals suitable for domestication. The village was born there because conditions allowed, but it could have unfolded differently. At night, the earliest villages must have felt both fragile and powerful. Fires glowed in dozens of hearths, smoke rose above the huts, and the sounds of people and dogs filled the air. Beyond the walls, darkness and wildness remained, but within the village, order and meaning grew. The circle of huts and communal spaces marked a world humans had made for themselves. In that fragile order lay the seed of everything to come. Fields, temples, cities, and civilizations. The threshold of civilization is not a sudden step, but a gradual crossing. In the Fertile Crescent 12,000 years ago, humanity places its foot firmly on that path. From huts of mud and reed, from shared meals, from symbols carved on stone, from ancestors buried beneath floors, a new world emerges. It is still small, still vulnerable, still uncertain. But it is the first world built not only by wandering, but by staying. The village is humanity's quiet revolution. It is the beginning of rootedness, of shared labor, of community memory. It is the point where survival becomes society, where landscape becomes home. From here, the long story of civilization unfolds. The first villages of 12,000 years ago are long gone. Their reed walls have melted back into soil, their mud bricks crumbled to dust, their plaster floors buried beneath layers of earth. Yet something of them endures. In the tells that rise quietly above valleys, in the charred seeds preserved in hearth ash, in the worn grooves of grinding stones, we glimpse their lives. From those fragile beginnings came the shape of human society as we know it. The villagers did not know what they were starting. They built huts to shelter families, raised dogs to guard fires, buried their dead beneath floors, and carved symbols on stone. They experimented with seeds, stored grain in pits, and gathered together for rituals. These were modest acts, shaped by daily need. Yet in their accumulation, they transformed the human story. They marked the passage from wandering to dwelling, from fleeting camps to enduring places. Mysteries remain. We do not know the words they spoke, the songs they sang, or the precise meanings of the symbols they carved. We cannot say whether their feasts honored ancestors, or whether their skulls were plastered in reverence or fear. We cannot know how disputes were settled, or how leadership was chosen. Much is lost. Yet what remains is enough to tell us that here, in the Fertile Crescent, humanity crossed a threshold. At the planetary scale, shift was immense. Villages altered ecosystems, redirected rivers, domesticated plants and animals, and began the long reshaping of the earth. The changes were small at first, but steady. They would grow into fields, towns, kingdoms, and cities. From these early huts flowed all that followed: laws and writing, temples and empires, the vast and intricate worlds of human civilization. And yet, beneath all of that, the essence is simple. A hearth's glow in the night, bread baked on hot stones, ancestors remembered beneath plastered floors, neighbors gathering in circles. These moments are quiet, fragile, and deeply human. They are the first steps of a journey that has never ceased. In this stillness, we leave the first villagers. Their fires flicker low. Their dogs stir in the dark. The river flows beyond their walls. The seeds they planted, both in soil and in memory, continue to grow. Humanity carries them forward across millennia.